And we're live. All right. Thanks everyone for joining today. We are live with Remen Okoruwa. Remen.
Okoruwa.
Remen from Propexo. Everyone calls you Remen anyways from Propexo, and that's
Yes.
what I'm sticking with. I've got a hard to handle name. I should not have done that in real time. And I have a ton of respect for where you're coming from. Remen from Propexo. Everybody knows you as that. And so good to have you chat. We've chatted a bunch of times in the past. Also, we had Ben on the show back in the fall at PropTech. And I just love what you guys are doing, and especially as I learn more and more about just kind of some of the nuances of the business. Hope we'll dig into that a little bit today. And everybody, so getting to hell yes. So why you're listening to the show today, getting to hell yes buyers are different than the conventional ways of selling. And one of the things that we seek to kind of reveal in these conversations is like, how do we get to hell yes? What is that buyer looking for? How do we meet them in their journey? How do we find them in their journey so we can meet our numbers and our targets, but at the same time respond to the fact that they're in control and they get a vote in this conversation. As always, this is brought to you by RCX. We are AI telemaintenance software that helps solve triage turns and trips, save you a bunch of time, money, effort, and ultimately NOI. Make life better for your people, both your residents and your staff. And as we always kick this off, if you have any questions in the show, please put them in the chat. We'll get to them in the show. If not, if they're after the show and you're listening to this not live, then we'll get notifications. We'll be able to respond to them accordingly. So first thing we always ask when we kick off the show, a bit about yourself. It's very interesting to find out how we all get into these roles. A bit about yourself, Remen, how you got into this role, and shed some light on the problem that Propexo solves.
Totally. Yeah. So a little bit about me. I sort of stumbled into multifamily. I would say the past decade plus of my career has been quite the exploration or random walk, as one might say. So after graduating from college, I started out in management consulting, mostly working with large Fortune 100s on strategy issues. I then went into an asset management investing role at a private equity fund investor. And it was after that that I first dipped my toes into the technology space when I joined the sales team at HubSpot. So you might think that this is going to be the lead in to a long and fruitful sales career. In reality, it was a short and painful one. So I learned the inside sales motion at HubSpot. I was not particularly good at it, but I think it gave me a lot of the confidence and some of the hard skills required to become a founder, which I then became. And I actually launched my first company back in 2016. It was a data analytics business. I did it for about 2.5 years. It sort of led into consulting, which I wasn't a huge fan of, having left that industry at the beginning of my career. So I ended up ending that business and returning to HubSpot on the product team. And it's really there. I learned the art and science of product management. I found my co-founder. I found my initial set of angel investors, and we launched the company that today has become Propexo. In my role at Propexo, I am head of product, and I do quite a bit of the selling, largely due to the fact that I did it at HubSpot.
Sure. And okay, perfect. That's how you got in the role. Now, what's the problem you guys solve, Propexo? And why
Yeah,
I think I'd love to hear why the problem exists, because that's kind of like there's two sides to that.
Yeah, it's a really good point. So let's start with why here. The reality is, property management software industry for residential, if you look just at the United States, you could argue that there are more than 10 major systems that folks can integrate with. Everything from Yardi, RealPage, Entrata, Remen, Rent Manager, Appfolio. And that's just focusing on the multifamily side. You start looking at single family rental. Now we're going to talk about Buildium. We're going to talk about PropertyWare, tools like RentBind that are emerging. And for technology vendors and PropTechs who are delivering services to either the residents who live at buildings managed by these tools, or to the property managers who do that management themselves, integrations have turned into a requirement for many of the buyers in this industry when they are vetting technology vendors. Unfortunately, building and maintaining 7, 8, 9, 10 one-off integrations into all these technologies is extremely time-consuming and expensive, both on the upfront build as well as the ongoing maintenance associated. And that's where Propexo comes in. What we offer is a unified integration platform that allows our customers to integrate with all of the top property management software platforms in the industry. And what's more, we marry that with an ongoing service layer that makes it really easy for you to effectively stop worrying about maintaining integrations and APIs, because our team keeps our infrastructure up to date with all of the ongoing changes. So for our customers, we help them go to market faster with new integrations and dramatically cut the engineering costs associated with maintenance, really allowing them to redeploy engineers to simply building their own product, not trying to wrangle APIs.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, and all these things are true within the industry with respect to the integrations pieces, because all these point solutions that are emerging, which is kind of the tip of the innovation spear, which is all this PropTech. I mean, it's not part of the PMSs. It's just that they're not going to do it, or they're not going to do it well. And so consequently, integration is the lifeblood. And you're right in terms of all those things, especially, I think this happened in the fall, where one of the major PMSs changed their spooling, their pushing, their queuing, their whatever, didn't notify anybody. And all of a sudden everyone's integration stopped working and they didn't even know.
Mhm.
And so like the not knowing part is exceptionally risky, because then you have customers going like at 5, then nothing's happening because there's no push. So I feel this pain from my side. When you guys are out there looking at the market, like how do you begin to, so now we're selling to PropTech companies, and you've got to sell to the major integrations, right? Like to the major PMSs. So is there a marketplace feel to it?
Yeah, yes and no. At this point in our journey, we've inked partnership deals with almost every major property management system vendor, largely because they view us as like a service provider that helps the PropTechs they want to work with just
Yeah.
get stood up faster and consume fewer support resources. So a lot of our energy and focus is on really selling to the PropTech side
Yeah.
of the house.
So for everyone that hasn't tried to go through this, could you explain how does a company get integrated today?
Whew, okay.
Yeah, here we go. We're gonna crack it open. We're gonna
Yeah,
start
yeah.
there, because
So,
you know more than I do. You go.
yeah, sure. Okay. So typically, the very first step you're going to need to do is not talk to a property management system, but rather go find a customer who really, really likes you and is willing to say, I will vouch for you as a
Mhm.
mutual client to the property management system that I am using right now. Why is this requirement? Most of these systems are going to demand they won't just give you API access. You have to prove that there's a customer that is paying them money today
Mhm.
that will actually use your product if they give you API access, which actually leads to a bit of a funny chicken and egg problem that
Mhm.
they can probably clearly see. For a lot of for a lot of prop techs who are just getting started, they need to get an integration in order to get a customer to work with them, but they need to have a customer willing to work with them in order to get approved for the integration.
Yes.
Why did we land on this particular system? It is not clear to me. I do know it. Like, I think that in some cases, I've been told that, like, hey, like people want to have the vetted vendors, and therefore this is a screening on vendors who might not have real industry traction. Coming from HubSpot, which is really my core experience, HubSpot made its integration program completely open to
Mhm.
anyone who wanted to build a solution on HubSpot, largely because the way HubSpot viewed the problem, it's like they wanted to encourage new companies to come into the space and prove to HubSpot's customers,
Yeah.
hey, we have something novel, something really compelling. You're going to want to start using us if you haven't heard of us already. So it's a slightly different philosophy than the world I came from, but that's the shape of it. Okay, so that's step one. You found a property manager, property owner who's willing to vouch for you to the PMS. Then then there's sort of this branches in two ways. For some systems, your Yardis, your Real Pages, let's say, you can just reach out to them. There's going to be a form on their website to fill out and schedule a meeting with their integrations team.
Mhm.
For companies like Entrata, the path is actually going to be you're going to need to have your client who's now vouching for you reach out to their account manager at Entrata to request integration access on your behalf. So once the request has been fulfilled, whether directly by you or by your customer, you're going to have a conversation with the API teams. They'll scope out exactly what APIs you need, and then here comes the real fun part. You're gonna be hit with a bill. So you're gonna need to start paying the fee. That fee can really vary wildly based on your integration needs, the number of APIs required. Typically, it's going to be in the range of $25,000 or so. Some systems actually have lower starting prices. Entrata, for instance, I know you
Hmm.
can start for about 5,000, but and that's 5,000 per year. For
Hmm.
all of these, these are going to be annual fees. But yeah, you're going to need to pay an initial fee, and then once that fee has been paid, agreement has been signed. From there, there's going to be the integration build process. Now, this is going to be where there's another fork in the road here. So if we're going to look at RealPage for a moment, after like as you're doing this onboarding process, they have a pretty hefty security questionnaire you're going to need to fill out,
Hmm.
and then post questionnaire, you're also going to need to pass a integration QA review. That
Sure.
integration QA review is something you're also going to see with Yardi as well as a core part of the process before you can be pushed to the
It's
marketplace.
dentistry. It's like
Yeah,
dentistry over and over and over again.
yeah. So for those playing along at home, first find a mutual client. Two, get in touch with the property management system. Three, pay the fee. Four, build your integration and get it QA'd. And then five, if you're still excited and you still have more energy, yeah, your integration has been added to the marketplace, and now you get the fun part. You get to do the fun task of actually selling property managers to actually use your integrated product.
Yeah.
And that I think that really leads us to get into hell yes.
Yeah. No kidding. Quick question from Anthony David Hunt. Who pays?
Yeah. In this industry, the PropTech vendor pays.
Yeah.
So ideally, you have priced your product in a way that you can effectively pass some of these costs back. But it's something you should really be watching out for. As you think about what your costs are, you should be thinking about, hey, do I need to integrate with Yardi, RealPage, Entrata, or other systems? And if that's the case, dig into what the anticipated API fees will be and make sure your business model still works after you've incorporated the cost of these annual recurring fees.
And which I find really interesting, practically diabolical, is that this is what creates almost, and I was chatting to you about this over text, is like a distribution decision point. Is like now I've got to think about distribution because it doesn't make sense to write 20,000 checks to 8 PMSs,
Hmm. Yeah,
right? And
yeah.
so what do you do? And that has a negative impact on your business. So how do you guys? So this is a basket of problems that everyone's losing value on. Propexo comes in, white horse, white hat. How do you guys solve that?
Yeah, so we try to lean in a few different ways. So one, we can help with some of the introductions to a few of the integration teams, which can just speed up this process. Because I
Mhm.
think that one of the things that can be most frustrating is feeling like you submit a form, it goes into the ether, and you don't hear back for 3 to 6 months. When you have
Mhm.
a client who's like waiting right now for you to get
Yeah.
this integration done, so you can get paid. So that's one of the ways we try to help customers. Once again, keeping an eye on the getting things accelerated point. When you build with Propexo, typically our customers are going to get their integrations done in anywhere from like 1 to 3 weeks. In contrast, typically when customers are going it alone, I mean, we've seen folks getting their integration into a property management system API that shall not be named.
Mhm.
That has run anywhere between like 3 to 12 months when they're building. Why does it take so long? Oftentimes, the systems you're integrating into are going to be these SOAP APIs where the
Mhm.
documentation isn't as robust. And honestly, probably the hardest thing to overcome is that when the API documentation in this industry oftentimes will not show you what the customer facing UI is. And so what that means is you're going to start building this integration, but you aren't quite sure what it's going to look like on the customer's end when you're pushing data into their system or pulling data out of it. And
Mhm.
so it can be so hard to build a really good high quality integration when you're doing it effectively half blind.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons why building with us, like we have a ton of visibility into exactly what these products look like, where data goes as you integrate in, and that can really be the difference between a okay integration that sort of works to an integration that knocks it out of the park and is delivering the explicit value that your customers expect.
Because if you're building blind, right, and you may be technically functionally correct or technically passing the test, but if it upsets the user experience, you're all of it's for naught. The check you wrote, the time you spent to invest in it, the managing of the API, all that's all of the garbage because when it gets to that user, the user has a vote on whether to accept your product or not. And you guys curate that.
Yep, exactly. And this is one of the things I hear time and again is that property owners and managers who are buying tech, they will say to me, "Hey, yeah, you should work with this vendor, Propexo, because I can tell you they say they integrate, their integration does not work.
Mhm.
And they've never been able to successfully demonstrate their product integration actually works, where I can see the data where I expect it in one or many of the property management systems that I'm using." So I
Mhm.
think that there's a bar where you might think you've checked the box on integration, but really the customer has final say.
Yep. And then ultimately the user,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
Interesting. And so when you're out there talking about this, like there's other ways to solve this, right? So what are people doing? I mean, there's the way of better put it. I mean, explain it. They can basically either not integrate, they can integrate all these like end to many.
Mhm.
And why do they choose end to many? Because it sounds like a slam dunk, right? Even when I chat with Ben, this sounds like a slam dunk. Why do people choose one to many?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So first of all, I want to frame what are the other options out there. So for folks who are trying to consider, hey, like, let's say I want to, like, what can I do if I want to integrate? One of the things I've seen a lot of companies do is, integrations. It can be expensive. You have the annual fee that each of these systems are going to charge. Propexo, we also charge a fee that you would have to pay on top
Mhm.
of those other fees. Like it is like there are real budget considerations that have to be taken into account. So one thing I've seen companies do is that if they are okay with simply like if they don't need to push data back into the system,
Mhm.
then I've seen a lot of companies focus on doing report exports because
Yeah.
every single one of these platforms has the ability to email out some kind of operational report. And these reports typically are going to cover your most common use cases. You need a list of work orders and their statuses. Bam, get the work order report. Need
Mhm.
a rent roll to see who's paid and like which units are paid up and which have outstanding balances. Boom, there's a report for that. Need to see like all the leasing prospects and where they stand in the funnel. Once again, there's a report for that.
Mhm.
So I think oftentimes people are going to start with these report export things, which can be relatively quickly configured and then just sent to your email account. And
Mhm.
like then you could parse that data, take action on it as a bit of a one-way integration.
Mhm.
Now, what's the issue with that? Well, it's a one-way integration.
Yeah.
So if you need to push data in the other direction, now it gets a little harder because what you'll find is that most property management systems, if you read the terms of service, they're the most straightforward way for you to push data back in would be for your customer to give you a seat in their portal, and
Yeah.
then you just manually add some data in. Well, as it turns out, for most property management systems, that would be a violation of terms of service
Really?
because your client is not supposed to allow a third party vendor a user seat in the portal. That is the norm in the industry.
Hmm.
Yeah. So if that is what you're doing, and I know there are many companies who actually do
Oh,
this,
it's still almost a practice. Like I hear
it
about it
is
all the
this
time.
is the norm. This is the norm. It's against the rules. But hey, like
Yeah.
there's a lot of things that there are the rules, and then
Well,
what people end up doing.
it's a known workaround, right? And so like
Exactly.
it's interesting as a seller to kind of like capture the known workarounds because those are where people are suffering a blocker and they're going around the convention because
Oh,
they got to get their job done,
oh,
right?
100%. And I think that this is also one of the things where I always like to compare things back to my experience at HubSpot.
Mhm.
HubSpot had no like you didn't create a HubSpot seat for anyone you want.
Yeah.
So it's like this style of integration where maybe it's more manual, and then you just like get a little human, let's say a human in the loop integration, we'll call it.
Human in the
Um,
loop. I love it.
yeah, it's definitely something that this industry just has a very hard stance on it, for reasons that candidly not super clear to me, but those are the rules you're dealing with. So let's talk about some. Before I talk about why you might use us, I'm going to sort of outline a few more strategies I've seen in the industry.
Yeah.
So there's this schedule report exports. Now, I also know folks who've set up like headless browsers. So effectively, they have something they create in Chrome, and if you give that headless browser a user seat or an active or users logged into the property management system account, this browser extension will essentially start clicking around. So it can
Mhm.
almost replicate AI functionality in a very automated way without
Mhm.
it's almost like now automated human in the loop because it's
Yeah.
effectively clicking. Once again, is
I didn't
this
know that was
allowed
still
by
going
the?
on. Like that was from like 15 years ago.
Oh, it's you. I think that there's a lot of creative solutions that
Sure.
you're going to see deployed here. Just like the giving user seats to a vendor, this is also a ban by most terms of service.
Yeah.
And then the final piece here, sort of the final approach is just more direct database integrations.
Mhm.
So Yardi, for instance, they have a means of effectively exporting backend data tables and then importing those data tables. So I've seen some companies where they built integrations where it's just like export a bunch of data, do some stuff to that data table, and then push it right back in.
Yeah.
Um, there's some real risk. That's some risky stuff there because this is SQL data, and if you push the wrong data back in, you can really
Overright.
mess up a client system.
Mhm.
Okay, so I've just spent like 5 minutes talking about all the sort of gnarly ways that
Yeah.
folks get it done. Then the final option is you just like use the APIs, you pay the fees, and you integrate in. So why might you choose to do that with us? At the top of the call of the episode, I already sort of outlined, hey, we standardize everything, we speed up getting your first integration done, multiple integrations done, and then we cut out a lot of the ongoing maintenance. But also, it's like we now are doing this for 40 plus different prop techs that span like a variety of use cases from resident amenities, bulk internet, leasing, maintenance, vendor management, tenant screening, billing and payments. So it's like we have seen so many different ways to get integrations done across all the major systems with almost every use case that you can imagine. And really, you get the benefit from our expertise,
Mhm.
if you work with us on this versus go and build it on your own.
Well, I mean, and not that's something to be said about handling also the management risk and ongoing management testing. So like if we integrate with four different PMSs and then all of a sudden we could do it just a simple release, I've got to run integration testing on all those four PMSs. I'm guessing if I'm connected to Propexo, I just run against my Propexo integration and
Yes,
then everything else goes hub and spoke from there.
that is exactly it.
That's a
Exactly.
lot of overhead. I mean, even just even the technical overhead of doing that and the technical debt of having to maintain all those things, it all costs money.
Yep.
So
100%.
then to the distribution thing, like given you're in the market, you're talking to prop tech companies, and there's this fiscal blocker going all out. Because I'm sure if we the problem gets more amplified the more integrations I need to have, right? But
Mhm.
it's not cost effective to go. And so do you find that a lot of people their go to market is impacted by who they're integrating with?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I will tell you outright that for a lot of companies, their first big decision is which property management system will they integrate with first,
Hmm.
And there's this exercise where they'll log into their CRM and they'll start tracking which deals are riding on which integrations. And
Hmm.
they say like, okay, well, based on we have the most revenue locked behind Yardi, so we're going to do Yardi first. That doesn't mean they don't have Entrata deals or RealPage deals or Remen deals. They just have to choose one,
Yeah.
and they don't want to pay a bunch of money for they might not have the funds available to pay a bunch of money to do all of them in parallel. So it's like I know there are companies where they are effectively giving up on winnable revenue because they're sort of doing this in sequence, and therefore they can only sell to the folks that they haven't supported integration for.
Yeah. Which is an unintended distribution strategy,
Hmm.
right? Because if I only the Yardi example, if I'm connected to Yardi and I'm paying them the check every year and I've spent the money on the integrations, I'm very inclined to focus on just customers that are running on Yardi. I just don't want the headache that comes from, and I want to be able to say yes to that question. Do you integrate? Yes, yes, yes. Right. So
Hmm.
it's interesting to see how that kind of shapes a narrowing of the TAM based on the integrations that you're integrated with.
Yeah. Oh, 100%, 100%. And I think this is like one of the things where, as I look out into the industry, this definitely feels like a direction where you're starting to see folks sort of like explore, is there a different way? Is there a better way to
Hmm.
handle these integrations? One of the things, if you look at HappyCo, for instance, they now have their HappyCo plugins,
Plugins. Yeah.
which allows a lot of maintenance related prop techs to directly integrate or integrate their products with HappyCo at no cost. And it sort of allows for more data sharing. But now this data sharing isn't going to be mediated by the property management systems, but rather it's just some prop techs connecting with other prop techs
Yeah.
and delivering a better integrated experience at a effectively a price point that you can't beat, which is free.
Yeah.
Um, I think that those approaches towards partnerships between prop techs that aren't effectively all running all data through the property management system are likely to be more common because the cost of these integrations it really is high. And I think
Well,
especially for
we're hearing from customers that are on some of the majors that are like really frustrated because they want innovation. The innovation will not, if you're going to write a check for, let's say, $30,000, that is going to that has to be passed down into some sort of pricing, and that's to make it much more expensive to buy that software or to buy that innovation. So like if you're a business case, if you're developing a business case, and that solves it's like the find easy renters button, and then all of a sudden that cost, it's they're not integrated with one of the majors, and you need that. Now you're really suffering through like, oh my God, I have this problem here, but you're not letting me have this, Mr. the PMS.
yeah.
And so like I'm hearing a lot of like uh anger, acrimony towards like the PMSs for locking them out of the innovation and
Yeah.
taking the check. So it's interesting to hear how that's emerging, because I could see a world where the scope of some of these, like, they're going to lose seats,
Oh yeah. I mean,
right?
already, I think you're seeing. I mean, you hear rumblings in the industry of property managers and owners sort of voting with their feet
Mhm.
and going from one property management system to another because the property management system they're departing with will not integrate with one of the tools that they really, really, really love.
Yeah.
And I think that it's unfortunate
Mhm.
because at the end of the day, I think whether you're property or prop tech or property management software system, the highest value in my mind should be how do we deliver value? How do we deliver value how do you do right by residents? And by doing right by residents and the property managers on site, can we then do right by property owners? And I think blocking out technology that improves the rental experience for all of the user populations that can be served by prop tech, it feels like it's contrary to the values of, hey, like we're in the business of delivering value
Yeah.
and delivering an amazing rental experience to all people who touch it.
I would shout that from the treetops. I get so for starters, I don't believe in the business philosophy, which makes it difficult for me to understand. Like I really try and be empathetic to somebody's, even if it hurts me or helps me, I want to be empathetic to the decision making to make sure that, hey, that's how I would run that business. But I actually wouldn't run the business that way. And that part there kind of creates a bit of like heartburn for me. Cause I'm like, I don't understand, given like technologists typically have a, as you mentioned, like how you just described it, we've got definitely an orientation towards creating productivity and creating value, but this is actively robbing value from the system. And, people, I hear this, you hear it every day that multifamily property management is in the dark ages. I will say this live, like there's a complicity, they're complicit in this lack of innovation in multifamily. And there's blame, right? Because they're putting barriers up and being short-term thinkers in terms of how the value can be created. Like we just had a conversation with one of our partners, and the conversation came up like, hey, how can I resell your software? Right? If we're going to be a successful partner with you, then I'd like to be able to resell your software. So we can start thinking about mutual reselling agreements, right? What's that feel like? Now they just earned a sales team member who's out in the market, stirring the dirt up, and wants to be able to bring deals to you. Like that's gonna supersede any sort of integration fee that you may or may not capture, and further makes me dedicated to that channel and that distribution channel. Whereas if you were to make it easy to integrate, I wouldn't be forced to try and bet on a horse. So it's like things like that drive me bananas. There we go. Things like that drive me bananas because it's like this is not how technology is supposed to scale. If you follow any of the lifetime readings on technology, it's not how technology works. And that's the part that I find really frustrating. So it's like I feel like we're battling gravity in terms of trying to bring innovation to the marketplace.
Yeah, yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think that, I know the things I've directly experienced. I can tell you that, if we look at how HubSpot, how Plaid, and so sort of
Yeah,
how other companies have really taken
the
approaches
Apple
to,
App Store, the App Store.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
you're competing at it's philosophically like you're competing against the App Store business model. Like if it was rev share, every proper tech in the company in the planet would put their hand up. I'm in. But it's
yeah,
pay up front. It's cover charge before you get to see the band. And I think that's just like this is philosophically I'm against it.
yeah, no. It's not the model I would have chosen
Yeah,
if
yeah.
so I think that as I generally, if I were to like first principles it, I think that if my goal was encourage the largest possible ecosystem that is most welcoming to early stage companies that have the opportunity to create innovations that my company might not be able to execute on quickly, I do think that exactly as you said, the App Store model feels like a really good one where it's de minimis upfront, like engineering access. This might be like a couple $100 a
Mhm.
year for the like API access. But then, as you said, they make their money on rev share. And I think that like with that rev share approach, the alignment is clear.
Yeah,
Apple wants winners because the winner, like Apple gets a 25 or I think it's like 27% cut
yeah,
of the winner's revenue.
yeah,
And that I think there's like something really simple. There's a simplicity to it,
yeah,
where if it's on a rev share basis, you want winners. If it's a more of a flat fee basis, you could argue that the incentive shifts away from wanting winners to just wanting as many people as possible paying. But then I think that the flip side of that is if it's on a rev share, then there's a ceiling of how much value any integration partner is offering. So the incentive actually, like purely incentive basis, looks like we want people paying for as many APIs, but using them as little as possible, which
right.
is actually like this. It actually sort of means that from a property management system perspective, they might not really want vendors to be growing and really using their API a lot
Right.
because because what they're collecting doesn't even cover the cost. And I think that this is where I want to actually show a little bit of empathy for these property management system vendors, because for them, I think that the fixed fee model has just been the industry for quite a while.
Yeah.
And it seems like a lot of people might be doing it because that's what everyone else is doing. But in reality, it might not actually be the system that they would choose to do if they could wipe the slate clean and do it all again. So I think that it's unfortunate. I
Mhm.
think that the model that this industry has landed on, it stifles innovation, and honestly, that probably doesn't. It might not even cover the cost of the property management system vendors who are the ones who are promoting it.
Well, and I would say that like the cost of the event, there's less, there's like, I can't, I don't know. I'm imagining the numbers. Let's call it 44 million units out there. Let's just imagine that there's 10,000 prop tech companies out there, which is, I don't even know if that's even close or if it's a zero off or whatever. There's way less prop tech vendors than there are seats to be sold. And so sell the seats, sell the per units, like do the math that way. And if you can get a bigger share of that total pie, you can have a bigger business and make enough money for everybody by eliminating all the waste. Like I just see it as being wasteful, and that part drives me bananas.
Yeah, yeah, I 100% agree. I think that there's also when I think about innovation in the industry, one of the other things I want to point to is that the high fixed cost model means that if you think about the vendors who serve property management industry, it's only really prop techs. Companies that you do not see have a native integration to any major property management system. You don't see Salesforce, you don't see HubSpot,
Mhm.
you don't see ChatGPT, you don't see
Yeah.
Claude from Anthropic. You don't see
Payment rail,
Calendly.
Plaid, payments,
Plaid.
like you, yeah.
Yeah. So it's like there's this interesting thing where a lot of the most innovative companies that if you use software, not just property management software, you're probably very familiar with these tools, but none of them have direct integrations. And I would argue that's likely a direct consequence of how the integration programs are run
Mhm.
and the burden and the barriers put up for even very large technology companies to get integrations and get connected with the property management software.
Mhm. Mhm. And so when you're taking, I mean, so this, in the 7 habits of effective people, there's the things that you can control, things that you influence, and then there's like the weather, right? This
Mhm.
is kind of like the weather for you, but it lands right in your box in terms of like having to manage it with respect to the customers that you guys sell to and what they can buy. Because there's another, because it's the layering on of the fees. So when you guys are out there talking about what you guys solve for, which I mean, in my head, like I said to Ben, like the math on dev costs, like really, it makes it real quick, right? With respect to what you guys solve for, how do you guys, well, you hear objections. So imagine, sorry, actually, first question around urgency. Presumably, most urgency comes from I've got a customer that wants to, you know,
Yeah,
that's demanding this. Like it's probably that's
yeah,
where it could, because there's a fee to you guys and there's a fee that they're paying. So if I've just got my API key to Yardi, I always use Yardi. I mean, just because of the biggest, like if just get my API key to Yardi, and I got that today. I need to get that dev going as fast as possible so I can get that, start recovering that investment.
yeah,
And there's 2 ways to do that. I can build it myself, or I can go with Propexo. And so using an integrator like Propexo, I'm going to speed up my recovery of that initial investment. And because that's your job. That's a
yeah.
problem you solve for me. Right. So urgency feels to me native in your sales cycle, because people are probably walking up going, Ben or Remen, Ben, please sell me this.
Mhm.
Let me buy today
Yeah,
versus any other way.
100%.
So then you do get objections. What kind of objections do you get?
Yeah, totally. I think the ejections fall into two categories. One, which we've largely solved, and second is more of a strategic thing
Mhm.
that varies customer to customer. So one of the original objections we had was, man, I love your product, but it's like I'm not really sure this is going to work uh, because 2 years ago, where the Propexo that everyone knows and love was
Yeah, of
not the same Propexo 2 years ago. 2 years ago, no one knew it.
course not.
So what we ended up doing was we implemented these pilot periods. So now any customer gets a free pilot where they can access our API, access our full documentation, access our technical team for 2 weeks for free.
Hmm.
Why? Because it helps people get comfortable with the fact that the value we're promising is real.
Hmm.
You can build the integrate. Like we have customers who actually get the integration live in that 2 week trial. So they haven't even paid us yet, but
Wow.
they have a functional integration ready to roll. And I think that like, so for me, it's like, hey, like we want you to feel so confident in the value you're receiving that you will effectively get a bunch of free value
Yeah.
before the credit card, before the Stripe payment link goes live. So that's one. I think that the second objection we typically see, and this is really only going to apply to larger companies, I found, and this is a strategic one. Some companies are a little bit less comfortable about the idea of giving all their integrations to a middleware vendor.
Hmm.
So larger businesses are like, oh man, strategically, like if you were to go away, what would we do? It's like, hey, it's like we don't like we think that integrations are a strategic part of our business. What I say to folks like that is two things. So one, like, hey, one of the reasons that folks work with us is because like we dramatically change the math on what it means to build and maintain integrations.
Yeah.
And for most businesses, I'm not gonna say all, but for most, like the integrations are a box, it's a requirement. It is not differentiating. The data you're going to pull from any of these property management systems and push back is the exact same data that your direct
Right.
competitor
Which
will.
is why you guys can have repeatable integrations and APIs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so ultimately, for companies to say, oh man, this is a strategic thing that we have to own, oftentimes that's actually masking a fear that, hey,
Hmm.
like we don't necessarily trust you. Or is it we have some other concern about your ability to deliver on the value you're promising, but we're going to call it we have a strategic issue with working with you.
Hmm.
So that's where we do trials for really, really, really big customers. There are ways you can contractually guarantee that if an
That seems
asteroid were
so.
to
At that point in time, you must realize you've got a philosophical blocker because you
yeah,
can't overcome that. You can't. So I would think that you can't outsell that. Like, if
yeah,
this is where it comes to the point that you're worried about your data and you don't trust my encryption, my SOC 2, all my stuff, and know that it's packet controlled and all those things, like then you're throwing me something. This is not a real objection. This is like
yeah.
you're fearful about your role in the organization. Maybe you're head of integrations, and
Mhm.
all of a sudden we're going to outsource it.
Yeah. I mean, so what I think ends up happening, we have one customers like this.
Yeah.
But the key thing is time. Most times when they voice this concern, if it's sort of like a flimsy objection, and we just need to reassure them that hey, we've recently raised a bunch of VC money.
Mhm.
We're very close to cash flow positive. For some customers, they're like, oh, okay, cool. Okay, you're
Yeah.
not some startup that has like 50 bucks in the bank. So for some companies, that's sufficient. For others, uh, it's really time. So we've had companies where we've had the initial meetings, they voice the concern, and then they disappear for 9 months. And then
Mhm.
9 months later, something goes wrong with their integrations. And it's
Yeah.
not just one thing went wrong, it's like several things have gone wrong.
Yeah.
And then they are revisiting the conversation and saying, 9 months ago, we were adamant that this is something we could handle, that's something we must handle. We're clearly not handling it. And at that point, we have customers come back and say, let's revisit this conversation. Let's talk. I want to start seeing some case studies from bigger customers just like me. I want to get confidence that you have other companies of scale who are getting value from Propexo. And what's great about doing this now for a few years is we 100% have those companies
Yeah.
now. So it's like we do see people come back, but sometimes you have to give them time to make that determination on their own
Because
that
they've got
they
to
do
land.
want to.
they've got to land at, that it's urgent on their priority inbox.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Did did you guys have, and again, this is when Google went down on Thursday last week, was there a negative, was there an impact to any of your, would that have been like, who was affected? Was there, I didn't know if there was an effect on our side or if we had to reboot anything. I mean, our application went down, our authentication went down, our SSO went down. So I was like, that was my panic attack. And then I was mildly relieved when it was Google versus like us. And then after that, it was just kind of like, well, all we can do is F5 the status page and hope things come back. And then we send the unfortunate email to all of our customers about, hey, Google's down. We're waiting. We'll update you accordingly. But then we're starting up in integrations. It's like turning the mill back on again. What was it like for you guys and your customers?
Well, luckily for us, we're an AWS shop, so so that bullet dodged.
Yeah.
But generally, like I will say, a few of the technology tools we use were on GCP,
Mm-hmm.
so we were seeing slowdowns or complete outages for some of the tools we use internally. Our customers, like it didn't really affect us. Yeah, when GCP was down. Yeah. But yes, but it didn't really, like from our side, it didn't really affect us.
Is that another thing? Like, there's like, is it easier to I mean, this is actually, I don't know if this is right or wrong, like, or even relevant. Like when a provider like GCP goes down and I've got push-pull integrations that are happening, to restart those, if I've got a Propexo, is that easier than me kind of like firing up the engines to all my 9 integrations? Because once you guys are up, everyone's up on your platform.
Yeah. I mean, right now, if you look at our status page, I think we're at 5 nines of uptime right now. And the way we're able to do that is we built in a ton of redundancy and auto scaling into our infrastructure. But more importantly, we built infrastructure that actually assumes things will go down. And so we have like really clever, thoughtful workarounds to, so when things go down, we make it clear, we make it really easy for figure out what has gone down, and then for you to essentially get it started again. 2 examples of what that looks like for all of our when we're pulling data out of the systems, we've built in automatic retry logic with an exponential backoff. So you know what? If the first attempt to pull data out doesn't work, we'll try it 1 second later, then 10 seconds later, then like a minute and a half later, and so on. And we'll sort of just keep on trying. And with the increment of time increasing, so that we give some of these underlying systems time to get restarted. That's just baked into our platform. And then on the flip side, let's say you're trying to push data in. If we ever fail to successfully push data in, we actually have both a dashboard in our app as well as an API that you can query that'll tell you, hey, here's all the right jobs that have failed. Here's the payload that should have gone in. Click this button to retry, or hit this other API endpoint to reattempt the push in. So we give our users a lot of tools to get both the visibility on things that have failed and then the knobs and levers to retry where appropriate.
Solving all those problems that come with just owning and operating the API, because it all comes with an overhead.
Exactly.
Gotcha. When you go, so I mean, given your journey, I mean, we got really techie, and you're a salesperson and you're a product person from before that. Like, given your journey, I like how you call it a walk in the a stump. What did you call it? A walk.
A bit of a random walk. I would say it's
a bit of a random walk, right? So your random walk. I appreciate that. Given your random walk in your life and your career, and even people that started Propexo, like, what bit of advice would you give yourself when you started your career, or what bit of advice would you give somebody who's starting a Propexo today with respect to getting hell yes?
Yeah. So I think the key thing is leading with empathy and just being curious. So much of what like doing so many different roles throughout my career has done is that I think I have a lot of perspectives and little voices in my head that are all sort of talking. And I think that whenever I'm interacting with someone new, sometimes I can engage them with like strategy consultant brain, where I'm like, okay, look, what's the framework I need to approach this with? other times it's more about the product. The product manager is going to come through and say, like, what is the actual problem that they're talking about? What's the underlying root cause? And then sometimes I actually just need to sell. And I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, they're saying one thing. I don't actually believe that's what they mean. And it's actually on me to probably push them to say what they are really thinking in this moment. And I think that all of those perspectives only exist within me because I had the opportunity to play all of these different roles. And I think that with that in mind, one of my advisors and investors came out of HubSpot. There was this framework he talked about being like T-shaped as an employee, where you can go, you're really deep on one thing, but you're actually sort of broad across
Yeah.
a number of other skills. And I would say that even though I do a lot of selling, I'm not deep on selling. Like
Right.
I think my core strength probably sits more in that product and strategy side of things, but I can sell, I can do marketing, I can
Yeah.
do accounts receivable when required. You know, I think that like going deep on one or two things, but really having good breadth, like that's what's required to work at an early stage company where you're not going to have the luxury of a narrowly scoped role where you only do X
Yeah.
and then you hand everything off to the person who sits downstream of you in a process.
Yeah.
And yeah, so and I think that the random walk it gave me the breadth and a bit of that depth.
I'll just share or echo what you said about, career in consulting. So I started in career, I was consulting for like 20 plus years. And I did have to deprogram myself. But whereas like when you're consulting, your job is to have the answer. That's your job. Even if it's like 90% of the answer, so it's to have the answer, no matter what. And even if you're half an hour ahead of the customer, that's the answer. And it took me a long time to deprogram that out. Probably at least 2 years of like like just being the person who had the answer. And that was like a tough thing to figure out because I tell you something, I've learned way more with 2 ears instead of one mouth, but like I've learned way more, much more from all these people I've been chatting with by being curious. And I feel like in the consulting hat on, you're not afforded the luxury of being curious because they're paying your rate and they expect you to know. That's what they're paying for. And it's tough because you end up giving probably bad guidance because you haven't had time to actually ask questions because they're paying you to be there at a very high rate. And so it's interesting. A friend, a former employee of mine, just got a job with a sales company. I said, look, you got to take some time and conscientiously deprogram the consulting out of you because if you come in with the consulting hat and the solution gun, like you're not gonna sell anything.
Yep.
You know, it's very interesting. That was great to hear. Who else do we have on next on the show? Who should we have on next as a guest?
Who should we? Who should we?
Yeah, who should I? Who should I?
Wow, wow, wow. Yeah, that great question. I mean, there's some amazing founders in the industry. I don't know if you've spoken to Connie Lee at Refi.
No,
They're doing some really, really fun stuff on the leasing side. Strong. I think they could be a really, really fantastic guest for y'all.
cool. Rappy at where?
Oh,
Reffy?
Refi, REFFIE.
REFI. Love it. Appreciate that. That's awesome.
Of course.
Excellent. Well, everyone listening to the show, thank you, Remen, today. This is a really good conversation. Certainly, we've got a chance to get technical, which is always fun to have a conversation because these things don't move without any sort of consequence. Data has to move back and forth. And I really appreciate you feeling comfortable to get into the business part of integrations and, opinions aside, what that means for people's decision making and their behaviors, because there is a financial consequence in terms of like given the circumstances of how integrations are done. I share your philosophy with respect to App Store, HubSpot, all those kind of worlds where it's about an open platform. I mean, on my LinkedIn, I say build bridges, not moats. And so it's like, it's that mentality that I'm allergic to, but it is the set of, those are the cards in my hand. And
Yeah.
so it's interesting to kind of think through and chat with somebody who's in that business. Appreciate that. Appreciate your point on curiosity. It's very valid in terms of like how you pursue understanding, especially in this business. There's a lot of people to talk to, it's that consolidation and aggregation of all their responses to a common set of questions that can help frame the problem that we need to solve. So appreciate that, especially given that you're two-sided, right, on the technical side of things. So thank you for all of that. Great chat today. For everyone listening, if you're listening on the live show after the fact, put in comments in there. Remen and I'll get notifications. We can jump on, ask questions, answer any questions. What's the best way to get a hold of you?
Oh yeah, so you can learn more about Propexo at our website, propexo.com. Also, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. You can see if you're watching this, you can see my name.
Yeah.
And you can also shoot me an email at my first name, REMEN, at Propexo, that's PROPEXO.com.
Thank you very much, sir. And if you're listening on the podcast, details will be in the show notes. But ultimately, if you could like or subscribe, that always makes it very easy for other people to find us. Remen, thank you so much today. I tremendously enjoy our conversations every single time. And I look forward to the next one, man.
Yeah,
All
Guillermo,
right.
always a treat.
All right. Take care, everyone. Cheers. Hang on.